Hello again, Upper Room. This month we're trying to answer the question, how do we share the gospel when we don't necessarily have an open invitation to do so? To put that another way is, how do we live lives that point to Jesus? One more. How do we live in ways that make people curious? The answer to these questions is found in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus calls us to be salt in the world, and Jesus calls us the light of the world. In Matthew 5:16, he tells us, "Let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." This month, we're focusing on simple, practical things that we can do that will help us be salt and light. In the kingdom, small things can actually prove to be big. That's definitely true with what we're talking about today. Want to be salt in the world? Want your light to shine bright? Be kind. Kindness is something your grandma or your mom encouraged you to practice. Kindness is something that seems small and inconsequential. To some, kindness could be seen as a form of weakness. If you're kind, you're a wimp. How in the world can kindness be seen as a form of weakness? With constant temptation to put yourself first, considering others and showing kindness, it's actually hard to do. If we asked your spouse to describe you, would kindness be an adjective they would use? If we asked your kids or your grandkids to describe you, would they say that you're kind? What about your coworkers? Are you known for your kindness around the office? We're called to love our neighbors. Notice in the love chapter, 1 Corinthians 13, Paul begins with love is patient, and the very next descriptor is that love is kind. What's interesting is that we all have the ability to be kind, but simultaneously we have the ability to be the opposite of kind, which is to be cruel, to be rough, to be short, to be ungracious towards people. I find myself being kind to people, but there's also moments where I lose my cool or where I'm not careful with my words. My family, friends, and coworkers might call me kind, but I can think of plenty of examples where they might say, he can be rough when he's stressed. He can be short. Every day when we wake up, we can be patient and kind, or we can be rude bullies who put things ahead of the people we're called to love. I love how Paul put this to the Colossians. He said, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity." Colossians 3:12-14 would be worth memorizing, don't you think? In the beginning, he tells us to clothe ourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. If I wore a bright neon orange suit everywhere I went, I would stick out, wouldn't I? I'd look like one of the guys in the movie Dumb and Dumber. But the point is, I would stick out. This is how we should be dressed everywhere we go. Our compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience should make us stick out in the world. Paul says, clothe yourselves in these things. You and I get dressed before we go out into the world, don't we? If we left the house without getting dressed, we'd have a nice orange jumpsuit to wear in jail, wouldn't we? Every time we go to be around people, we clothe ourselves. If it's hot, I wear shorts. If it's cold, I wear jeans and a flannel. If we're going to be active, I'll wear shoes that I can move in. If it's going to be formal, I'll get dressed up. We clothe ourselves for whatever occasion we expect to face. In last week's video, I said that we'll face testing every day. If we go into the day expecting to be tested, the tests prove to be normally not that hard. But if you're caught off guard, you may struggle. I have to confess that 2 days after I recorded that, I found myself at the doctor's office for my son's orthopedic appointment. He broke both arms and his forearm back in July. When we got to the office, my attitude started to tank. The computer system was down. Everyone at the ortho office needed their x-rays examined. The place was packed. Our doctor was over an hour behind with his patients, and I watched my patients start to sink like the Titanic. 2 hours into waiting, I about bit my son's head off when I was trying to text my coworkers about why I was going to be late for a meeting back at work, and he had the audacity to ask me a question while I was mid-text. Felt so bad about it later, and I had to apologize. Being delayed at the doctor's office isn't that hard of a test, but I went into it not ready. Had I clothed myself in patience, I probably would have done much better. Had I remembered the upper room teaching I gave 2 days before, I would have been prepared for a simple test like this. So how do we be kind? What does it look like to bring kindness into the world? For starters, you can't be self-absorbed and show kindness. By definition, a kind person will put others first. If it's all about you, your list of to-dos, what you want or what you need, you'll never be able to recognize an opportunity to show kindness, even if that opportunity hits you in the face. How do we not become self-absorbed? There's a million-dollar question. I think the way to avoid being self-absorbed is to start your day focusing on Jesus. A little worship, prayer that gets you ready to be clothed in patience and kindness. When I start my day talking to God about the hours ahead of me, I can do so much better. Once we leave the house, how do we practice kindness? One way, hearkening back to our first week in this theme, is to ask people, how are you doing? It's a great start. It opens doors. I think another strategy is to be on the lookout. If you see a need, meet the need. There was a young man who was getting his hair cut, and when he was done, he noticed that an elderly lady was struggling with her coat. This young man went over and he helped her with her coat, and then he went all the way over to the door and he held it open for her. Everyone at the hair salon was watching this interaction, and when the young man left, you should have heard the conversation. The whole group of stylists and beauticians and customers were completely blown away. Did you see that? Wow! You don't always get a response like that every time you hold a door open for someone, but those little things sometimes have a big impact. When you consider others first, you're practicing kindness. You know, there's some really bad press out there about Christians. Unfortunately, we've earned a good portion of the bad press, but if the world is looking for us to mess up, it would be good to be extra careful, wouldn't it? Kindness changes the narrative about Christians. Kindness is a key that unlocks opportunities for us to share the gospel. My upper room disciple friends, clothe yourselves in patience and kindness. What a privilege to be called salt and light. Have a great week.